Berlin. Hi out there in the Horn Hangout world. Amazing where you're all watching from today. Really incredible. I've been reading the chat and there's quite a lot of countries represented out there. So thank you all for watching. I am very, very happy and very honored. And it's also a little bit strange to be sitting here with my colleague, but more my friend, Fergus McWilliam. Welcome to the Horn Hangouts.
Thank you.
You can talk in that one. There you go, that one's yours.
But I have to tell you first, this is also a bit strange for me too, right? I think how many years we've known each other and how it all started. Here, down below us is where the Berlin Wall ran.
There.
Right over there is the Philharmonic. And this is where also
20, oh,
right.
It was 89 when we met.
The wall was still standing.
It was still standing, and I remember standing at a bit of the Berlin Wall with a chisel. Do you remember when you and the kids and Carol and we went out to the wall and we chiseled away? I've got those photos somewhere.
I still have about 10 kilos of stuff in the cabinet. Yeah.
Most people do at that time. Thank you so much for coming. There's so much I would like to talk to you about when we met and how we met and what a huge influence this man has been on my life. No, we certainly won't. Really, Fergus has been a huge influence on me and my horn playing career and life in general. And to be now sitting in the same orchestra with him is really quite a privilege. And thank you for coming on. But tonight isn't about that. Tonight is about this book, How to Blow Your Own Horn. Now, we have, I don't know how many of you have this book out there, but those of you who haven't got it, get it. And those of you who've got it, I'm sure you've read it like I have. And we are here today just to find out exactly what's behind this, because it's not totally uncontroversial, Fergus, I must say. But you already say at the beginning, you're expecting criticism. Just the title, an anti-horn method.
Yes, I'm trying to be controversial. I was hoping to initiate or to ignite a debate, at least a healthy debate. But I'd be quite happy even if I got some nasty comments back from people.
Have you got any yet?
Unfortunately, no. I've failed utterly. Everybody likes the book. And I was hoping to upset a few people. Because I'm flying in the face of the traditional way of doing things, the traditional way of thinking. And I'm encouraging or challenging all of us, really, to turn things upside down and look at it from a different perspective entirely. It has a lot to do with, if you will, empowering students to take over their own training, their own education, their own discovery about how to learn to play the horn, indeed anything in life, but to, by definition, of course, to put the authority of the teacher in some question, because there can't be two bosses, there can't be two chief cooks in the kitchen. Who's teaching, the teacher or the student?
There's an interesting thing in the book about how a child learns to speak.
Yeah, a child doesn't acquire language the way we learn a language in school. Every child that's born on this planet is able to learn any language: Chinese, German.
German's a tough one.
Difficult languages. And yet there's not a child that can't learn it unless they're deaf. If they're born deaf, unfortunately, then they are missing one key ingredient. That's the ability to hear other people speaking around them. And it's the skill we use as a child. It's a very infantile skill, but we acquire language using neural pathways and so forth, which we have abandoned in our learning of instruments and music. And it's time that we got back to that kind of learning again.
A quote from your book: "The way it's supposed to be is rarely, if ever, the way it actually is."
This, I admit I stole this idea from a book in a bookshop. Way back in the 70s, a period of great upheaval, turmoil and revolution in the student days. It was a book by, I think, an American author called Jones. Anyway, the title is what I stole. It's called "The Way It's Supposed to Be," S-P-O-Z-E-D. I never read the book, but I love the title, because it stuck with me all my life. That there was implying there something about there's a discrepancy, there's a cognitive break between the way things really are and the way they're supposed to be. And it began to dawn on me as I tried to start teaching other students that I was trying to teach them things which were at odds with the way I actually did it myself.
Do a lot of teachers do that, do you think?
I suspect we all do it.
So we tell the people to do this, to warm up and practice this, and
because it should be like that.
Because it should be like that. Because maybe we've been taught like that, but that's not necessarily what we do. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. When I had my very first student, I was about 22 or something. I was in panic because I just got the local solo horn job in the orchestra. 3 days later, I get the first phone call from a parent with a student. There's a son wanting to play the horn. You're the new horn player in town. You must really know what you're talking about. Here's my son as a student. And I panicked. I knew nothing. I never knew anything about how to teach. The first thing I did, it's what we all do, was instinctively try to remember my lessons.
Yeah.
What did my teacher do?
Yeah.
Can I remember what my teacher did? And so already my memories are suspect. They're not exactly 100%. So I start to inject ideas that maybe my teacher told me. What I don't do is trust myself. I trust the tradition, I trust the pedagogy that was handed down to me, my bloodline. And it's like playing, what's that game called? You whisper each other's ear? Telephone.
Chinese whispers, telephone. Yeah.
And after 10 or 20 reinterpretations, the messages change.
Horn Hangout whispers.
Yeah. And so horn pedagogy is constantly being confused and messed up, but with the best of intentions. That's
true. Another quote: "The horn can not be taught; it can only be learned." See, this is all tying in with each other.
Yeah, that goes back again. I think that ties into an early experience that I remembered from my childhood. I would come home from my horn lessons about the same time as my sisters would come home from their ballet lessons. And
oh yes, you write about it in the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my mother would ask us, we'd sit at the table, have tea or something, and she'd say, "Well, what did you learn today?" And my sisters could easily demonstrate, legs and things that we learned to do this, and we learned to do that, and we learned to do this. And Fergus, what did you learn today? I learned not to press too much. I learned not to, everything I learned was a negative. It was like a backwards learning, reverse learning backwards, learning, or peeling an onion. And later on I started to think of that, well, that's a process of discovery, isn't it? It's a personal discovery as we go inside ourselves to learn more and more how we actually do it. So right from the very beginning, I realized, I didn't realize then, but I realized that right from the very beginning, we learn the horn very much the way we acquire language, by trial and error, by personal experiment, personal observation, until you get to a point where you become a dutiful, servile, well-intended, hard-working, loyal student.
Like I was of yours.
You were never loyal. Loyal, yes, but hard-working, yes, and you always
okay, that's another story.
But it was this thing. When we were kids, we were never so smart, never so clever. And we've got to reactivate and reconnect with those skills.
Okay. You came, how long did it take you to decide to come out with this? Because even okay, the anti-horn method, that title came a bit later. It was actually, the title was about the myths of the horn. Eventually, were you setting out to put things right, or were you so convinced in the way you discover things that you dared to get out there? Do you know what I mean? Or were you?
It was a bit of all that. I started in 1986 with my first diary entry. I came back from a rehearsal or a concert or a lesson or somewhere, and I was perplexed by something I had experienced. Something didn't make any sense. A colleague or a teacher I heard had said something, and I listened to that and thought, yes, correct, that's the way it's done, that's we all agree, but it doesn't fit. It's something that it just didn't quite feel right. And I made notes to myself. Over a period of a year, I started acquiring a lot of these notes, and I suggested to an ex-teacher of mine back in Toronto that we engage in a correspondence, public correspondence.
Who was that?
Eugene Whitty. And my idea was, what if we had an open correspondence long before the internet and blogging? We would write.
You wrote it all down by hand? Okay.
We'd write letters to each other, discussing problems we had as teachers.
Okay.
Insoluble problems, or not easily solvable problems, things we'd noticed in our students. And perhaps we would publish or somehow disseminate our correspondence together. Well, we backed out of that after a while, and so it never got anywhere. But I kept writing. And I kept stuffing these single pages and sometimes 10 pages into.
I remember you sort of just sloping off and writing stuff down. I really do remember. It's been a process been going on for a long time.
I learned it all from my students.
Yes.
And ultimately I started thinking, this could be, I wish I'd had this when I was a student. I started looking at this stuff and I said, you're being.
I had this when I was a student.
I was thinking to myself, well, it's all very well, smart, clever you to do it now, but you don't need this now. I should have had it when I was a student, and maybe other students and teachers could benefit. And so finally I started forming it into a book form, but by this time, 2 or 3 years ago passed, and everybody knew about the famous book that would never be, and the working title that I gave it at the time was Horn Heresies.
Yeah.
And it was good friends of mine, you know who you are, the ones who gave me that kick up the backside to get it published.
Yeah, I think you wrote about them in here, didn't you? You said
thank
thank you very much. May I tell you who they are? You said the acknowledgements were Joan Watson, Scott Irvine, Roger Bobo, Kozo Moriyama, and Paulo Muniz Toledo.
Thank you, fine guys. You were the ones who held my feet to the fire, slapped me by the side of the head and said, "Get on with it." And so I did.
Okay, well, we are very grateful that you are. We just had a quick question from Andre Lipkin. He said, can you give us an example of a specific myth or teaching method that didn't work? Just as an example of something. I mean, I think, Andre, if you read the book, then you'll find a whole book full of them, and then Fergus's solutions to this. But, what would you just pick out of
let me start with the 5 heresies.
The 5 heresies.
The 5 heresies are essentially 5 words.
Page 19.
I should know this by memory.
The 5 controversies, 5 questionable subjects.
And before that,
the 5 forbidden words. Okay. Well, that's page 18. Sorry about that.
The 5 forbidden words.
Okay.
The things I try to avoid mentioning at any time in a lesson are...
Practice.
Loudly. Say it loudly.
Practice. Warming up. Mirrors. Embouchure and diaphragm. You never like to use these words ever. Actually, this is very true. He's not just making it up, he really doesn't.
It's heavy.
Okay, practice.
How are we going to teach? How are we going to have a lesson without mentioning these or using these concepts?
This is very controversial because there are a lot of students out there, and we come across them all the time in master classes and private lessons, who are looking for a guru and looking for that person that will change their lives and give them a practice plan that will change everything. And now you're saying practice is a forbidden word. Okay, you've got to answer that.
We have to work. We have to study, we have to explore, we have to investigate, we have to research. But practice is a word which has become imbued with terrible aspects. You know that old phrase, practice makes perfect?
I have to stop you just quickly. We just had a message from Stefan and Andre. Stefan Dor and Andre Zust, our colleagues, they have an interval. It's in the Philharmonic. They're just across the road. Hi, guys. And they just said, we're having an interval and are watching in the Philharmonic. Sorry, I just had to interrupt. Hi, guys. Okay, sorry to interrupt, but that's what the Horn Hangouts are all about.
Okay. Well, practice.
Practice.
You've heard the phrase, practice makes perfect. Actually, practice makes permanent. And it only makes perfect if you practice perfectly. The problem is that we don't know how to practice, we don't know what to practice, and we tend to practice the wrong things all the time.
But that's what we need teachers for, to tell us how to practice.
Not necessarily.
I'm just being the voice of adversity, right. Okay.
Then the 5 controversial subjects.
We got to warming up. No, we've got to go through the forbidden warming up.
I think I have more support among other teachers on the 5 controversial subjects than I would have for the 5 forbidden words.
Okay, so mirrors, embouchure, diaphragm, it's all explained in the book anyway. The 5 controversies, the 5 questionable subjects. Now, these are really things you hear teachers say all the time. Avoid mouthpiece pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That's normal. I mean, the more you press, the more it hurts.
But why does it hurt? And why are we pressing?
We're pressing because we're not blowing. See? I feel like it's student again all over today.
Stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're blowing, you have to have a counter pressure to make an air seal.
Yeah. So the questions are going crazy here. Never raise the shoulders when inhaling. Not quite the same opinion as you on that.
We were told as children, see, most of these things are things we tell our beginning students.
Yeah.
They're important and they're correct at that time, but very quickly we grow out of these things.
Yeah.
And what we meant was, don't go.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what, yeah.
But if you're going to take a deep breath into the chest, whoops, they went up.
They go up.
So a lot of people are trying not to raise the shoulders, so they sit like this and prevent themselves from inhaling.
I remember sitting next to Dale Clevenger and Alice Clevenger and watching them take in air, and those shoulders went up.
Have you seen Carol Jansch from behind?
No, I actually only met Carol Jansch on...
It's an experience. Carol, if you're watching this, but remember the first time I met you, you played Schumann Adagio Allegro. away from me, I sat behind you. It was an anatomical mystery to me, incredible expansion.
She is incredible.
Also vertical.
Always keep the throat wide open.
Yeah.
That's what lots of teachers say. Why should not? How can you play with the throat closed? Are you saying play with the throat closed?
Again, we're getting confused.
Yeah,
I'm confusing the mouth, the back of the throat. Here is where we can open or close.
Yeah.
But you can't open your voice box. It's made of cartilage and bone.
Explain that.
Well, a lot of people are trying to stretch the vocal cords open.
Yeah.
Get the biggest space possible, and they sound like this.
It's a misconception. It's a fundamental anatomical misconception. We horn players are not doctors. We're not anatomists. We do not understand what goes on inside ourselves. Only very recently, in fact, I had a film of me with an endoscope going right down up my nose and down into my vocal cords, filming my voice box while I'm playing. And
you did that in Japan, didn't you? You really had something.
And several hundred other players and singers.
Really?
And it was extraordinary to see how small the space there is between the vocal cords.
But I find still that you hear a lot of students doing that, and that's when the sound goes. So I make them go ha and ho, and you can feel this movement going on.
Far too many people try to play too open and lose air compression.
Okay.
And lose all articulation fluency.
So there's some great questions coming in here. Guys, let me just talk to him for a few more minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes of just questions. I'm just going to shoot them at him, okay? Because we've got to I just want to finish the 5 controversies. Inhale and exhale without hesitating.
Okay, that's the bit about breathing in time, right? 1, 2, 3, ta, which is fine if that's what you have to play. But how many times do we actually get to play something like that?
Well, certainly not in my orchestra. In the Berlin Philharmonic, you go 1, 2, 3. Bah.
Or you're an opera, or you're playing a musical, or something where you have to wait for somebody else, and you have to be able to just suspend action for a moment.
Yeah.
The business of inhaling and exhaling rhythm is again designed to help young players make music and to breathe within a musical phrase, as if it makes part of the phrase. But then once we grow up and probably get work and start having to do serious performances, we discover all the time that we cannot. Almost never get a chance to breathe like that. We have to learn that there are other ways, and then we have to learn to become comfortable with the space between the breaths.
I've just got to go back to the air, because Fergus says something in the book that is so true. You compare the air and the embouchure to a car. You say embouchure, sorry, I said that word, but I think you said that if the embouchure is the steering wheel, then the air is the body and the brakes and the rest of it. So basically the engine, and that the air does everything. It's not just the inhaling and exhaling on time or whenever.
A car without a steering wheel is not a very good idea.
No.
But if the car's not going anywhere, you don't need a steering wheel.
Yeah. There's so much stuff in this book. Eliminate embouchure brakes. Now that's a favourite of mine, because people seem to think you mustn't have any brakes, and I have, I think, about 10.
Do you know who said that?
Who?
First horn players.
First horn players? Oh, Stefan doesn't say that.
I didn't say all.
Okay.
Stefan is unique.
Yeah.
No, what I mean is people who play almost always on the high side of the horn never need to change and have no experience of it. Those who work in freelance situations or in a changing position in their orchestra, having to play high and low, and in the middle and all over the place, people work in different kinds of ensembles, freelancers and so on, have to be able to really control at least 3 octaves up to 4, which means you're crossing from tuba to trumpet range. And that's when you're going to encounter breaks. In fact, I've got a little exercise in that.
There's some very good exercises in here. There is actually something, Fergus. You've made a nice picture of page 91. There is a little picture in here of an embouchure. And there's but then you said Phil Farkas, whose book I like very much. You said that he'd said later on in life he hoped he hadn't ruined horn players by writing that book.
Imagine that.
He really said that?
I hope, there's quite a cult of fans surrounding Farkas, his legacy. But I was fortunate enough to know him, and we were touring Europe once together, and I think it was in 1979, I think. We were in Stockholm, and I was with my ex-teacher there, Wilhelm Lansky, Otto's father. And we had a lovely evening, and towards the end of it, Phil finally he was drinking his beer, he kind of snorted into his beer and said, "Oh, those books. I probably did I may have done more damage than good with
Well,
it.
I'm thinking of all these very confusing photos of embouchures, but actually he was right, no smiling, no this, and you have got a picture of
I
an
know,
embouchure in
I'm
your
doing
book.
the same thing. But what he said was very important. He said, at the time he wrote the books, he was much younger, a less experienced teacher, and he was writing this as much to convince himself as any students. Later in life, with the perspective of those many decades of huge experience, he then became much more pragmatic about it and realized that the book, any book, including this one, can have a dangerous side. Why? Because students are too good at being students.
Well, everyone's looking for, we're looking for it in life as well, everyone's looking in life for the way to happiness.
Which is why I put this little word down here, an anti-horn method.
An anti-horn method, yeah, okay, all right. But it's still great to meet someone and be inspired by them, and it doesn't matter actually who inspires you, it's just finding that inspiration and wanting to work.
That's the whole. I agree. I know exactly what it feels like. It was wonderful to.
Well, you were that for me, I must say.
I had my own role models, but we're dangerous. Role models are dangerous because we, with best of intention, we benignly disempower our students.
But
we don't set out to do so.
No, of course not.
But to the extent that you hold me in some regard of respect.
Not that much.
That's good. Good attitude. But you see, that's the point. That you have to stand up on your own feet and do it yourself in the end.
Yeah.
Ricardo Casero, anyone know him out in Ricardo, if you're listening, in Berlin, he's a fantastic trombonist, fantastic artist. And he's the one who said, anyone who's made it in this business, anyone who's survived, anyone who's made it in the professional or world of brass playing, is by definition self-taught. They may not admit it to themselves.
One of my quotes, it's fantastic. It's really absolutely true. The best players are the ones that can teach themselves, but the ones that are also lucky to have had some inspiration along the way. So enough compliments. But there's something, I'm going to go back to one of your naughty words, the diaphragm, because Aaron has written in. He says probably means I have to buy the book. It's true, Aaron, you have to buy the book. Practice warming up embouchure are also different from person to person, but diaphragm control seems vital.
Yeah, it's vital, but there's nothing you can do about it.
I mean, you are supporting, otherwise you wouldn't be getting a note out.
Look, every time we use the word diaphragm, everyone thinks they know what we're talking about. And like everyone who's out there right now, to take your fist and punch yourself in the solar plexus right now. Alright, instinctively tightened up to protect yourself.
What happens if you cough?
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got the right geographical area, but do you notice how you tighten up into an isometric muscle arm barrier? And that's designed to not let any air be driven out of your lungs. That's when a boxer takes a punch in the solar plexus and you have the wind knocked out of you. The idea is to protect the breathing mechanism, so we go and we think that is support, and that is not what support is. But it's a hugely popular misconception, and therefore rather than saying, oh, you've got it wrong, but let's work on how to do the diaphragm, let's forget it. The diaphragm is an involuntary membrane.
So you don't talk about that in your lessons if someone comes up with a question like that. So that's why I'm glad they've asked this
Support.
question.
Support is the thing.
Yeah.
And that is abdominal.
Rodri has just quoted Dale, just do what you have to do.
There's great wisdom in that. Really great wisdom.
Just do what you have to do.
You know what James told me?
What?
I was begging for lessons. All we did was go to pubs. And finally he said, what was it you wanted anyway? He said, we want to have a lesson. He said, just get on with it.
Get on with it, yeah.
That was one of the best things I ever heard in my life. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
Go figure it out.
But there is no, you still have to spend, like Håkan Hardenberg said in the Hangouts, where he said, these 10,000 hours that you spend alone in a practice room, you got to do it.
Do you know what's 10,000 hour theory? There's a theory that any skill that's going to be taught.
Well, Håkan spent about 50,000, I think.
But there's a theory that you need 10,000 hours. Once you've got 10,000 in, then you forget practicing at that or training. But
how many years have you had your 10,000?
Well, look, I admit here publicly, there was a time when I did 8 hours a day.
That's where you've got your little.
Yeah. For 6 months, I did 8 hours a day. And then I realized I was nuts. I never did it again.
Can you see this little scar there?
Anyway,
I think every good student, every good player has put in the practice.
You've heard the koan. you'll never get better without practicing. But practice is not by itself going to make you any better.
Yeah. Well,
it depends on how you practice, what you practice.
And what you say time and time again, it depends on how well you listen to yourself. You say this all the time in the book.
Well, that brings me back to the child again, acquiring language. When we were very small, we had ears like elephants. We obviously could hear amazing things. We could hear so acutely. We listened not only to the sounds around us, but we listened to our bodies. We could adjust our tongues to make that ma sound. And then we would notice how closely did my sound fit my mother saying, oh look, he said mama. Oh, mama. So I'm trying to ape her again. And so this is what we should be doing when we work, is listening to ourselves at all times. And you know, and we just had this recently in a public situation where we all talk to each other, we listen to a player, playing fine but not listening to himself. It was quite clear it was all.
Yeah.
And that's very common, very, very, very common, that you're so busy trying to play the horn that you become deaf. You can't hear yourself. Yeah,
there's even a section called horn deafness.
What's it?
Horn deafness. Yeah, I had a horn deafness, eggs, and then after eggs, which eggs is a really good one, but we won't get into the eggs maybe here. You can read the book. Morgan has asked about not seeing the forest for the trees. If you could just go into that just briefly. I have got this down here. Not seeing the forest for the trees. Does that mean not doing all your practice and not listening, basically?
No, it's the problem that teachers have, as well as students, that we become fixated on a single issue. Whatever the motivation might be, but a student or a teacher might decide that maybe the embouchure is not quite right. And so we become so fixated in our work with the student on the embouchure that we forget, we miss a lot of other things that are going on too. We can't see the whole forest because of the trees. As we say in English, you can't see the forest for the trees. There's a similar phrase in German, and it describes this phenomenon of becoming too concentrated on isolated details or a single detail at the expense of the general larger picture, which would be much more helpful. And if you saw a larger picture, the individual detail would very quickly assume it's very low priority.
I promised I would ask some of your questions, so I'm going to stop blabbing myself and get to them, if that's okay. Hadley asks, and I love seeing all these names, you guys, it's so great because we're turning into a real little community. You know Hadley, yes, you know Hadley. It's turning into a real community here, and I'm so happy to see when you're all watching it. It's just fabulous. Anyway, Hadley says, hi Fergus, hi Sarah. Fergus, you grew up in several places. How did you discover a model horn sound to emulate and use for your own learning? How did you discover this sound? Loch Ness?
Well, Loch Ness is not exactly a cultural capital of the world. We were listening to a battery-powered radio, had no electricity in those days.
Yeah.
Gas-fired stove and heating and battery-powered electricity.
Most of our viewers don't even know about those sort of things.
But
they're far too young.
I was obviously, although I had no memory of it, I know we were listening to BBC and to classical music on the radio. So I was hearing something there. But it was my first orchestra concert that I remember when I went to a concert at the Edinburgh Festival. And the horn group, the horn experience of the night, which is so exciting, so fascinating to me, that I was just completely overwhelmed and grabbed my mother's sleeve, and I can't imagine what she was thinking. As I was saying, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a professional horn player, just like those guys.
Yeah, well.
And that sound that I heard was a section of Alexander's.
Okay.
That's the sound I heard first, and that's the sound I said about trying to emulate all my life.
Okay. Well, good advertisement again for Alexander's, but they're worth it. Funny, and we've got two questions. One's actually for me. Kendall asks, when you first began studying with Fergus, how did you find him different as a teacher? May I answer that?
Well, you better, because
well, I'll be very quick, but when I met Fergus as a teacher, I'll just tell you about the very first lesson I had with him. I was having a lot of problems with my playing, and I was on tour here in Berlin, and Fergus, we met Fergus at a rehearsal, and we invited him to the show, and I remember thinking, oh, he can't come, I'm not playing well enough. Fergus came to the show with his wife, and they both invited me over the next day. Fergus said, bring your horn. I was like, I can't do that, I'm having too many problems. Yeah.
Because it was Carol, my wife, who said, she's got it.
She really was.
She's not right.
And I turned up at Fergus's apartment, And with all these excuses that I wasn't playing very well, I played 2 notes. I think literally 2 long notes, and that was all the playing I did in the lesson. That was my first lesson. So that was the main difference, is that Fergus wasn't actually interested in the physical problems that I was having. He just wanted to hear, he said he could smell it. He just wanted to hear, yeah.
Did I talk a lot?
You talked a lot. That was the other thing. He wouldn't, so he doesn't shut up. He really goes on. But it's for a young student, it's great. You never get a chance to play.
Chance to be wrong.
So Fergus was different in that he just got cut through all these technical problems that I was having and just went for the inspiration. And for some reason, it just worked. I had some really great teachers, but this just clicked. And I never, for some reason, my playing just started to be better. The other thing that made him so different with the teachers, he really, really believed in me, and that meant a lot. Meant a lot. When you have the feeling that your teacher really believes in you, that's, I think, the most inspiring thing.
That was right, wasn't I?
Okay, that's enough. Fergus. Oh no, we won't answer about that. What a fantastic book. Everyone said they love these books.
Where's the opposition?
The opposition, yeah, you guys. If there's any of you that think it's a total load of rubbish that we're talking about, then do write in and say.
Dare you?
Campbell would love some more insight in the famous Fergus warm-up. Why it works for you and how we can apply that essence of efficiency to our own practice.
My famous warm-up? Is there one?
Yes, Fergus's warm-up. I wish we had a horn. He picks it up and he goes, "Bap!" That's a high C. He puts it down and he goes and drinks a coffee. I'm not kidding.
It's a bit of a joke. You know, I do it because I have to now. It's part of my trademark. But I also did it the very first time just to see if I could prove something to myself. Mm-hmm. Could I do it? It was so outrageous, so absurd, so pointless, so counterproductive. I mean, according to traditional thinking. And I thought, well, let's just see what happens. And it became kind of a gag each day to see if I could just do that. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it works most times. But there's a big subject here of the issue of warming up.
May I just mention the word bellow? Bellow in the car?
Yes. Well, we're students and have the time on our hands. We warm up as if there was no tomorrow. As if the day had 36 hours and our chops had 25 hours of endurance in them. Once you get out into the working world, particularly the freelance world, or even right here, how many times have we been stuck in traffic and race into a rehearsal, the Berlin Philharmonic, full sweat, out of breath, rushing to your seat.
It's usually from the airport after a gig.
Or something like that. And you have to hit that stage, hit the horn, hit the piece, running, no warm-up, nothing, just pick up the horn and blow and go. And there's no excuses accepted. No explanations, no excuses. You're expected to be there 100% and going, guess what? It usually works. Mm-hmm. When you can't warm up, you find a way to play anyway. Which raises the whole question, is warm-up necessary in order to play well? And that's a big subject. Mm-hmm. But as a general principle, warming up can be done in a matter of minutes, even seconds, but 1 or 2 minutes of very light and easy playing, a few notes, can be enough to get you started. Mm-hmm. What I was doing in the car, while I was stuck in a traffic jam, was shouting, screaming, bellowing, singing, to get my lungs open, to get blood into my brain, to wake myself up, like that. And that, I realised, was what warming up was a lot to do with. It was getting yourself physically active.
Absolutely agree.
Mentally active.
Yeah.
Proactive, ready to go, ready to fight.
Yeah.
And when you sit there at 7:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning and it's still dark and you're in some practice cell, the cellar of some dingy music school, and you have to warm up. And you sit there for an hour, an hour, 2 hours, waiting for some angel or blue fairy to arrive and say, there, you have now warmed up enough, you're allowed to start playing.
Andreas, would you really want to attempt Till Eulenspiegel with no warm-up? You would, he would, Fergus would. You probably have done.
I had to do it in concert. Back in Canada, on first horn. And I was late.
Okay. And you just turned up and played it. It was the first piece in the program.
I
to be a genius.
Inside I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But it had to go.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes, like Fergus says, you just got to do it anyway. Just got to do it anyway.
Funny, listen to what all these old pros are saying.
Jeremy in Chicago says he's enjoyed reading your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about mortification of the flesh in relation to practice? I forgot that bit. That sounds quite terrible. Mortification of the flesh. Does it mean pressing as hard as... Where does that come? I don't even remember that bit.
That's a chapter, I think, of practice, addiction, guilt, and self-abuse.
Gosh, that sounds really awful.
Yes, but you see, that's what a lot of people do. That's what we really get off on. We're addicted to punishing practice. We're addicted to abusing ourselves because we hope that maybe if I abuse myself enough, I will be admitted into a blessed state of acceptance. I will have suffered enough to maybe I will be allowed to progress, or progress will happen by itself. And it really is self-abusive.
Practice makes perfect. No, practice makes permanent. Practice makes perfect only when you practice perfectly. You won't improve without practicing, but practicing won't by itself make you improve. That's exactly what you said.
I just heard that.
Yeah, I think that's, you know your book very well. So mortification of the flesh means really basically doing it till you
punishing
drop.
yourself for no good reason, other than thinking that you're supposed to.
Some people refuse to never miss a day of practice.
Now that's a very individual thing, it's a very personal thing, but I have been concerned over the decades now in my career. I've met brass playing colleagues and brass players all over the place who, some have never missed a day's practice in their lives. And when I mentioned this to them, I noticed this and I found this really quite remarkable. And they said, well, I don't dare take a day off because I don't know what would happen. I've never missed a day's practice, therefore the risk is too great. Since I don't know what might happen if I took a day off, I'm never going to take a day off. Very bad psychology. It's extremely negative. And if that drip, drip, drip of negative information is going on in the back of your brain all your life, that's got to do some damage somewhere to your self-confidence.
Someone just asked me, there's so many great questions, I'm so sorry. You know what we're going to do at the end of this session? When we're not filming, when we're not live on camera anymore, Fergus is going to stay on the chat for 10 to 15 minutes and try and answer your questions. I'm giving him an iPad and he's going to get working. And so keep the questions coming even after we've stopped filming, because Tim and Jakob are getting very nervous because the longer the interview goes, the more editing they have to do. So we can't go on for too much longer. Just a couple more things. Thanks, Tim, for doing the link. Luke in the USA says, I wish I had a student that was addicted to practicing. I have the opposite problem. Should a teacher lecture the student about the importance of regular practice or not? Very, very good question, Luke.
It got me on that one. Because as you can see, my comments have been addressed to the ones who practice too much. But here's a question for you, a reverse question. Could it be that some of these students are resistant to practice because they inherently sense there's some discrepancy, some problem there? That why is practice so good? Come on, just because you're saying it, show me, prove to me, where can I improve, why should I practice? So maybe the onus, unfortunately, is on you, yes, to go that extra distance to not only to force them to practice, but to convince them what they have to practice and why. I think a lot of young people want to know why, to what purpose, show me how this works. And if I can be convinced that it works, or that there's a reason for it, they will make the effort. But the simple authoritative command doesn't necessarily work.
Curtis in the Navy says, it's not like taking a shower for a day. Maybe you smell a little worse, but you can still make it work. Thanks, Curtis. It's about practicing every day.
Real wisdom.
Absolutely. Is that what you do in the Navy? I think you're saying, okay, you don't have to lecture the student, but at regular practice, every student has to put in the hours.
They have to discover for themselves where the benefit lies.
That's the thing. They need to discover it themselves. Yeah, that's a very good point. Quick question. Look, quite a few people, this has nothing to do with your book, want to just know just a few words about your mouthpieces.
If you go to my own website, fergusmcwilliam.com, in one word, you'll see there's a little story that I give you the background to how I developed these mouthpieces. They were
sorry. Richard Fisher just said, my teacher charged his students more if they didn't practice. That's a great idea. I'm going to try that one.
That's a good motivation. I like that idea.
Sorry.
No explanations, just pedaling. The mouthpiece was again a pragmatic solution. I needed something for myself because none of the mouthpieces I had seen in the market actually suited me. And when I finally, you can see the story about how I managed to finally get one right with old Joseph Clear, But then people who started playing on it, my colleagues who were in Munich would say, "We have a blow on that. Oh, that's really great. Can I have a copy?" And they started going to him and asking for him to make more custom copies. And it got so tedious from making all these custom mouthpieces that the idea was then first mentioned of going to production. I have no idea why it's so popular, because there's nothing about the mouthpiece which is not just average.
I play on one, as you know, they all know. I play on the McWilliam one, but because of my thick lips, I put a Paxman rim on there just to keep a bit of Britishness about it. You know.
I play on the McWilliam one also.
Yeah, it's just
I
wonder why. Anyway, so listen, all these questions. This is really quite incredible. Curtis says, "No, we're all squeaky clean in the Navy," so thank you for that. Hey, we've got a couple more things I just wanted to put on. We have, has really nothing to do with your book, but it has to do with Fergus. I think we've had so many horn questions. I just wanted Jakob to just show us a little bit of your quintet, your beloved quintet. Your quintet is your quintet is more than your family in a way. You see them more often than you see your own family.
Sorry, Carol.
Sorry, Carol. The wives have really been incredible over the years, putting up with this.
In fact, our quintet has been together for 25 years. And some of our marriages haven't lasted anything like that long.
Yeah. Well, we have these wonderful little videos that we've done here at the Philharmonic. Klaus Wallendorf and I did ours in an elevator at Berlin main train station, and Fergus was on the roof in a very special place like this. Have a look. Great. So we saw that. So it was pretty cold up there that day, wasn't it?
It was frigid.
I have a last question for Fergus. As I say, Fergus will stay on the chat, so keep the questions coming. He'll answer as many as he can. Fergus, in the book, you said something that I want to just throw back at you. If you only had 30 seconds of playing time, what single lasting impression would you want to leave?
I would like to have the most number of listeners feel a sensation of not loss, but remembrance, some kind of, the German word is Sehnsucht. If I could play a single, my last note would dissipate into the air, and they could all sense something like a remembrance from long ago, something distant and almost mythological.
What would you play them? Bach?
No.
There's a lot of Bachs in different keys in the book.
You know, one of my favourite little things is the solo from the second Rachmaninoff piano concerto. Something like that. Something romantic.
Okay, I just wanted to turn the tables back.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good student, see?
Yeah.
Taking the authority and hitting me.
Yeah, well.